Hi, my name's Ed Wilson. My friends call me Dread, or Dread Ed. I'm obviously mentally and physically disabled. And I think at this time, with all the challenges that the people in the disabled community, for want of a better label, are facing, that it's right that people hear how this process that's currently being inflicted upon the disabled has affected them. And of course I'm referring to the Department of Work and Pensions changes, and also to ATOS. But really the fault and the blame for this lies squarely, I believe, at the feet of the government for making such draconian changes that clearly do not have the consent of the public or the people at all. And there's a huge price being paid. Early this year, the dreaded brown envelope came for me from ATOS, DWP, whoever they are. And so began this process of incredibly intense form filling, administration and bureaucracy, things that I cannot do on my own and that I've had to help from friends with. And then you find that the Department of Work and Pensions have used this computer-generated report, and this report is then read and interpreted by a nurse. And in my case, the nurse, I asked very clearly whether or not she was qualified. That is still in some doubt. And so an unqualified or unregistered nurse gave her opinion on this computerized system, and according to it they said that it was obvious I wouldn't be able to work in the long term. However, I would be placed in the work-related activity group. Now this seems quite a benevolent gesture on behalf of the government, this idea of support into work, and that's how they try and paint it. But what they don't tell you is that your benefits will cease 1 year after you've been placed in this group, whether or not you find work. And that itself is not right. There is no support, there is no work. As we know, there is mass unemployment. I mean, there's millions of people out of work already, and putting a further 3 million people into an already overstretched workforce when they have no ability to perform or function as well as an able-bodied person is actually creating a very unfair system of competition for jobs. And there are people out there who just cannot work. People look at me and go, well, you can talk and you're a bit intelligent. You have absolutely no idea of what I've been through. In May 1998, which is 15 years ago now, I was working hard. I was a successful manager in an insurance company. I had the executive house, I had the company beamer, I had all the pay and benefits and ludicrous things that go with such a position. And suddenly I get a phone call one Tuesday afternoon from a neurological department saying that I needed to go and see a consultant neurosurgeon. Well, I've just had the best review of my career with my favourite boss, and I'm doing really, really well. And on the Thursday, I go and see a consultant neurologist, and that consultant neurologist starts performing a load of tests on me, and I have no idea what for. He got me to stand up on one foot, and I fell over. I couldn't stand up. It was most peculiar. And I asked him what the purpose of the tests were, and he said, well, you do realise you've got a brain tumour, don't you? And I said, no. He said, well, it's been in your medical records for 7 years. Why has nobody told you? At which point he realised, obviously, that I didn't know. And so I just wanted to make you realise, anybody who hears this, that it could be you that this happens to. And after that, I went through quite a hellish week. following Wednesday, 9 o'clock in the morning, I go into surgery, and I come out at 2:30 the following morning, and I would forever be changed from that moment on in many ways, but physically, what I can't describe the pain. There is nothing comparable. I mean, back pain to me is, it's painful for those who have it, but it's nothing in comparison. This pain that I had a disc of bone cut that big in my head, and a day and a half of screaming after surgery, and then slowly your face, as you can see, I'm facially disfigured. Your face stops working. You realise you're deaf in one ear, you're blind in one eye, and partially sighted in one eye. And that you have no balance, that you're incredibly clumsy, that you're blind on this side where you have a fractured skull, that you fall over all the time. The list of disabilities I have is about 26, and some of them would seem so insignificant and minor. I have tinnitus. Well, that really is hard, makes it hard for me to sleep. I don't like going through and reliving all my shortcomings. I'm sure nobody does, and this review process is inhumane because it's forcing people to be looked at in a way by others as though they are somehow inferior. It is the most discriminatory thing that has happened in recent history. I just cannot believe it. A friend of mine, she was put through the review process. Within 3 weeks, she'd killed herself, and it can't have helped. And there are people out there who are literally dying as a result of this. So I went through this review process starting in January, and over the months there's been letters backwards and forwards. Never do the people you write to, do they ever reply? It's always from somebody else. The bureaucracy is incredible. You cannot get any form of legal aid or assistance. The normal routes are all blocked. It's as though every obstacle that can possibly be placed in your way is being placed in your way. And to be fair, I feel a lot of people have suffered enough. To keep you up to date with where I'm at with the Department of Work and Pensions and their tactics, for want of a better word. I'd kind of gone a couple of months. I hadn't heard anything in the way of a reply to my letters. I didn't know where I stood, and my benefits, because I had refused, because it would be harmful to my well-being and on doctor's advice, and knowing my own medical history, work itself would be dangerous for me. I find it incredibly hard to cope as it is, and the psychological damage of trying to take on even more in my life than I already struggle with would be devastating to me. I don't want to admit that. I wish to God I could work. I wish to God I'd never had any of these disabilities, but I have, and I've lived through them, and they've made me who I am, and I've learnt to love the man I am and accept the man I am, and I think we all should. The Department of Work and Pensions had sanctioned my benefits because I refused to attend what they call the work-related activity group. I was given less than a week's notice to attend, and I have amnesia and I forgot. It was not important to me. And at first they wrote a letter saying, well, your benefits have been sanctioned £20 because you didn't attend this meeting. And I thought I'd rather pay the £20. And so I didn't query it. But the next day they sanctioned my benefits to £0, from 500 and something odd pounds a month to zero. Didn't write to me. After 2 months, I obviously have other provisions for my disability. Everything I do is well within my rights and legal. I am comfortable in my disability financially. But this cut in my standard of living was dramatic, and it was causing much worry and anxiety. And at the end, I was at my tether. Unfortunately, a friend of mine said he'd found help from a guy on a website called Buffer Zone. His name is Tony Lee, and he's a very kind man. He and his partner have experienced the same problems of the review process by the DWP, and he leapt up and helped me with my case. And finally, the Department of Work and Pensions acknowledged that their review process had been outside, shall we say, of its own guidelines. First of all, because of my neurological conditions, I should have been reviewed by a doctor and not a nurse, and that's crucial. That's something they didn't do. And so they used a fraudulent means of review to attempt to remove from me a legal and lawful entitlement in a most underhanded way. And then, as each time my friend Tony has helped me, they've kind of given with one hand, relented, and then tried to take with another. And on 2 weeks ago now, they finally back-paid my unpaid benefits of £1,300, so just over 2 months' worth of money that they had unlawfully stopped from me. And I was at that point relieved, thinking finally it was all over. But now they've said that because they've put it on a non-contribution basis or a contribution basis, they've switched it somehow in some technical way. I now have to reapply and face all this again next year from February. And I think it's inhumane for a human being to have to endure these reviews after reviews after reviews when it's clear that the motivation is not for my well-being or the well-being of those with disabilities, but the motivation is purely a monetary one, to take away from the most vulnerable in our society. And as a human being, we cannot do this. You cannot hurt people who've already been hurt way more than they deserve by the chemicals in their food, the chlorine in the water, the vaccines that have been pumped into them since they're tiny children. People are dying for money so that a few have more than they need. It's not right. I'm sorry, but it's not right. And it's not right that the unemployed who can't find work or get the support they need through no fault of their own, that they're somehow chastised as a scrounger. There aren't enough jobs. If you have a job, you've got to consider yourself bloody fortunate and thank those who are on benefits and say, God, at least I'm a little bit better off than you guys. Because no one wants to live on a life of poverty. It's the number one killer. The number one killer. And let's have more poverty. Are you insane? Sorry, I get kind of emotional on this issue, but I think it's important.